The World Bank yesterday expressed fresh concerns about the current subsidy regime in the Nigerian electricity supply industry. It has projected that the federal government could be paying as much as 3.4 trillion naira by 2023 if the current shortfall persists. Speaking at a World Bank dialogue with energy reporters in Abuja with the theme Fostering Knowledge Sharing and Dialogue on Power Sector Issues in Nigeria, top officials of the bank said the bank would continue to assist the country in dealing with the challenges. To discuss further, we have Omoyusi Temitope, investment strategy analyst at Afrinvest. Omoyusi, thank you so much for joining us. I want to take a look at a couple tweets from the governor where he listed out how these funds would be deployed and who they will assist. If we can put those tweets up from Governor Sanwo-Olu. All right, there we go. Today, we launched 20 million Lagos COVID-19 Action, Recovery and Economic Stimulus Program to support poor and vulnerable households. This marks another milestone in our effort to combat the negative impact of the pandemic on our livelihood, food security, and economy. Then he continues in his next tweet where he outlines who's going to be assisted. Said the CARES program will support 125,058 individuals, cover 69 markets, and a minimum of 2,512 MSMEs will be supported. We've set up a steering committee that will be headed by the Commission for Economic Planning and Budget for effective implementation. Now, Omoyusi, I think this is part of this $750 million loan secured from the World Bank for all the states. How far do you think these funds will go?
Thank you for having me. The first question is, why do you need the stimulus? So, an economy needs a stimulus, especially when you know that there's a huge output gap. What I mean by that is, 2020, economy actually went into recession. And the output gap is because we are now performing below potential. Although Nigeria was performing, even the state was performing below potential before 2020. But, there were projections that the economy would grow by 2% in 2020. COVID-19 brought it down to 1.9% negative. So when that happens, it's very important for both state government and federal government to actually provide stimulus to actually cover for the output gap. And what I mean by output gap is when your when full employment level is actually is actually below the potential level. You cannot attain the full level of employment. So I'm coming over that again. So when your full employment is actually above your capability, your income level, in another way, you can say that when people cannot actually meet their needs, you have aggregate demand is actually above aggregate supply. Although we know in Nigeria we have the two sides, both aggregate demand and aggregate supply side are challenged. So the interesting part about what the Lagos State government is actually doing, or with this stimulus package, is because this spending is going to be strategic. So what I mean by strategic spending is because, important segments of the economy is being targeted. We are looking at markets, individual and MSME. You know that currently in Nigeria, MSME account for over 50% of GDP and it accounts for over 90% of employment. So I think this spending is actually strategic and it will help the government to actually cover for the shortfall that actually resulted from the impact of the pandemic. Because currently, we are below our full potential, meaning the full employment level is actually above the current level we have. So that level of spending will cover for the shortfall.
Thank you for that. Now, we've seen the internally generated revenue figures for 2020 for Lagos State versus other states. Lagos account, I think it was 418 billion, accounted for about 1/3 of the 1.3 trillion that all the states generated. How far, also Lagos internally generated revenue exceeded Lagos FAC allocations. It was the reverse for the other states. How far do you think these funds will go for other states in the nation compared to how Lagos would deploy them? And how about the impact?
All states actually need all the money they can get. Although Lagos State is actually have some level of competitive advantage or comparative advantage in terms of geographical location and the economy size, other states actually need to utilize this fund when they get it. Actually, it's very important, even more than ever. They need to utilize it to cover for the shortfall in their output gap as well. In terms of the level of employment, you know that what we've been seeing around this rural-urban drift, we've been seeing a lot of people moving from other states to Lagos State because there are no opportunities elsewhere. people will continue to be attracted to an environment they can actually find opportunity. And you know the implication of that? It increases income inequality, not income inequality by individual, even across states. You know, currently Lagos State account for close to 30% of Nigerian GDP. We have 36 states, and a single state account for 1/3 of the GDP. You know, is the challenge. So the fund is actually very important for other states to actually provide opportunity in terms of enabling business environment, attractive condition for businesses to thrive, and which in turn will create job opportunity, and there will be less pressure on a few other states like Abuja, Port Harcourt that have some level of amenities and opportunities that attract people from other states.
Great stuff. You have a chart, so I think we're going to put that up, where you, and this is speaking of Lagos State, where you compare, I believe it's purchasing power, a purchasing power chart. You're comparing food and transportation costs at the national level, which is on the left-hand side of the screen in red, with the black background and the red bars. On the right, with Lagos State's changes in food and I think transportation costs in the yellow chart, yellow background with the black bars on the right. And this is for Lagos State. What's the takeaway here in terms of purchasing power, Omoyusi?
Okay, so the point here is that consumers are actually currently very challenged in terms of commodity prices. According to the survey done by the MBS, that was between 2019 and 2020, it was actually estimated that Nigerians spend over 56% on food, right? But between that time, between 2020 and 2021, food inflation had gone up by about 20%, over 20% currently. So meaning most people will be spending up to 60 or 70% of their even expenses on food, which is pointing to the fact that purchasing power is reducing. That has implication for the economy, because an economy cannot grow if you don't have solid purchasing power, and solid purchasing power cannot be so adequate if there is no output. So in Nigeria, that is why our situation is actually very specific. It's not recession, it's stagflation, because we have both weak demand and weak supply. In advanced economy, you have some level of supply, but demand is actually weak. So this is why just by spending, you are able to stimulate demand to match up supply. But in Nigeria, you have structural factors that are affecting supply, and you have waning and shrinking labor market affecting demand. So with the chart we have here, you see that some of those items actually went up by 60, 70%, 80%, and 90%. And if you look at those items closely, they are items that are consumed by the low end of the income, low income household, and the poor people. So which means the level of poverty might have even grown beyond what it was reported in 2019, that Nigeria had just 40% in poverty. So this has a grave implication for food security and a lot of other social vices in the country that are fallout of high cost of living.
Excellent. You mentioned stagflation. How effective are intervention funds in an economy facing stagflation?
Basically, stagflation has to do with the combination of slow economic growth, recession, and inflation. When you have stagnation and inflation, it's just a portmanteau bringing two words together: stagnation and inflation. So in that kind of economy, it is very important for government to spend strategically. I actually mentioned strategically because you cannot just throw money to all problems, especially when you see that supply side is also weakening. For instance, if you throw more money at people, household, and individual, because supply side is constrained, they will continue to put pressure on limited output, and that will keep prices up, which is why government, both monetary and fiscal policy authority, have to actually address the problem strategically. So stagflation basically is different from recession. So economists will continue to argue that Nigeria did not undergo recession in 2020. It was actually stagflation, because in a recessionary environment, you have low inflation. And with low inflation, you can actually spend your way out of recession without being fearful of inflation. In the current economy, we are looking at inflation at 18.17%, and the outlook is about 19.1% for this month. Next month, we'll continue to see pressure. So it is, however, very important to spend strategically when we are addressing stagflation, by addressing issues around creating jobs, ease of doing business, and partnership with private sector on specific projects using the public-private partnership. I think all of these measures need to be put in place to actually address the current stagflation we have in Nigeria. Thank you.
Great stuff. We've mentioned the World Bank. Well, these $20 million coming from $750 million that the World Bank is providing across the country. There are comments on power sector subsidies. Nigeria possibly spending up to 3.4 trillion naira by 2023. What do you make of that estimate?
Well, that subsidy is not always a problem. But how do you spend the subsidy? Are you subsidizing consumption or production? So when production is subsidized, it will be directed to the most vulnerable people in the society. But when you subsidize consumption, sometimes it actually tilts towards people that can actually afford these essential services that actually brought about the subsidy. So two things have to be done. One, there's need for adequate data collection to actually target people that need to benefit from this subsidy, while people that can actually afford it pay the price reflective tariff or cost reflective tariff. We know that the World Bank is actually estimating that we are spending trillions of dollars on subsidy in the next few years, which is going to put pressure on fiscal policy. We still need a lot of money to provide infrastructure. We are looking at over 3 trillion infrastructure deficit in Nigeria. So we can't afford to just subsidize when it's not getting to the right people. It actually involves a lot of strategy to ensure that data are collected to address the right people. And again, consumption are strategically subsidized so that we can address the right people in the society. And it's very worrisome because currently, according to the World Bank, Nigeria has one of the highest people in the world. That is, we have the largest number of people without access to electricity. This is even about 25% above the next lowest country, that's Democratic Republic of Congo. So this is quite worrisome. I think the sector needs to be properly addressed because no nation can actually thrive without a viable power sector. Even breaking power sector from its own context, you can do nothing without power. Like if you don't have power, you can do nothing. So no nation can actually thrive from infrastructure, telecommunication, banking. All of these things rely on electricity. And if the sector is actually addressed, I'm telling you, we will begin to talk about income redistribution. I think this is the importance of fiscal policy, ability to distribute income evenly with relevant and optimum policy.
Omoyusi, we've got less than a minute to go, so I guess 30 seconds. Just where do we begin with the power sector? Is it effective exchange rate pricing of gas for Gencos or prepaid meters? Just 30 seconds, where do we begin with power?
Well, we have to look at all of these things all together. It involves mixed strategy. Let's actually segment the market by using data. Like I said earlier, we need data to segment the market. Let's address people that can actually afford, and the set of people that cannot afford it, we'll design another template for them so that they can actually benefit from electricity, because every economic policy is to address welfare, no matter the spending. If you're saying that your deficit or debt is increasing astronomically, if the policy does not address welfare, we are going nowhere.
Omoyusi Temitope, investment strategist at Afrinvest. Thank you so much. Great conversation there.